One of the things about Terry Bollea that I think will be his legacy, as I indicated in the post we just put out, he's going to be remembered for a multitude of things. Nobody took wrestling mainstream like he did. And of course, he was given the opportunity of a lifetime by Sylvester Stallone to star as an antagonist for part of the Rocky III movie. Wrestling was never mainstream like it was prior to that opportunity.
No, it was that era. That was the era when it started getting big. And I remember the transition because I remember when before WWF, it was, I want to say it was like NWA. And that was Dusty Rhodes and that whole thing. And I remember going to see those, and it was definitely much more under the radar and off the beaten path than it became once it became WWF and they went into that whole era. It did. It changed the whole thing.
Well, I do want to correct Dave Hunter. Yes, it was first Hulk Hogan, but then it was Stone Cold Steve Austin, and then it was The Rock. But it was an interesting era, to say the least. Wrestling had a couple of peaks, if you will. It was never really something that I can say was of great interest to me. But being that Jen and I are a little over a decade apart, it's probably reasonable to assume that when Hulk Hogan was at the top of his game, was at a similar age for Jen as it was when Stone Cold was at the top of his game. I went to WrestleMania 15 in Philadelphia, and that was an interesting experience.
So what year is that you're talking about now?
99.
Okay, so 99. All right, I was already, married for 2 years and in law school and living in San Antonio. Like, I was not anymore following anything having to do with wrestling. I was like, I was like a grown-up then.
It just kind of, I think in many ways, it just kind of came along at the right time. That's probably the only way that I could really describe it. At the time, I guess you would say I was a freshman going sophomore year of high school. So yeah, time-wise, it just kind of made sense. And I followed wrestling for maybe 3 years tops. Then it just, I didn't pay attention to it anymore. I realized that it was silly stuff. And, honestly, the thing about wrestling that I really enjoyed, hence why I liked, ironically, I would say my favorite wrestler is also Jordan Chariton's favorite wrestler, Bret Hart, because I liked the art form. I liked what the performers would do in the ring. I wasn't necessarily caught up in these storylines, which frankly got pretty stupid after a while.
That started taking the precedence of the whole project, and it became their stories. It became like a soap opera situation.
But I think what got neglected in many ways was the health and wellness of these wrestlers. And there were multiple attempts to deal with this problem over the years, but there was no circumstance greater than our very prideful, when I say this, friend of the show, Jesse the Body Ventura, who stated from the very first time and stated it every time that he came on, whether as just himself or with his son Tyrell, that wrestling would have looked a lot different if at a very important inflection point in 1986, where the wrestlers attempted to unionize, and it was Jesse Ventura that led this effort.
And who was one of the people that worked against it?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Jen, because I think we're going to have to play that clip. So here we go.
Were often exploited. These wrestlers were not unionized. They didn't have medical protection.
There was definitely a need for a union in wrestling. That's what Jesse Ventura was trying to do.
And so, just so you guys know, this is Bret Hart, who I think was probably the best in-ring performer, along with a few others. But, for me, when I would watch wrestling, I admired, as I said, the art form that Bret and a few others brought to the table.
I don't know of him. I guess it was just a different era.
No, Bret was in that era. He was the Hart Foundation, if you remember that tag team. But anyway, the point is that, Hulk Hogan was the larger-than-life personality. That's who people knew. They knew of Hulk Hogan because he was, oh, what you gonna do, brother? But when he got in the ring, it was very substandard in-ring performance, to say the least. But for a lot of other guys that were in the ring, this was life or death in many cases. And one thing that Brett talks about, a lot of others talk about, is that wrestlers are typically on the road like 300 days out of the year. You know, this is like a traveling circus. So it's understandable why they would want to go to lengths to try to, you know, get themselves proper health care, paid leave, a living wage. Again, things that people like Vince McMahon would never in a million years want to give their wrestlers, hence why Vince McMahon is a billionaire.
Hence why I think first of all, I've never liked him. I've always disliked him. And I think I always saw him as somebody just taking advantage of everyone else. And he is. I find him gross.
Couldn't agree more.
Jesse Ventura was trying to do.
Please welcome Jesse the Body Ventura.
Right before WrestleMania 2, Jesse was trying to start a union and undermine Vince.
I'm here to make sure that Vince McMahon tells it like it is. Jesse.
You know, I was on Vince McMahon's team all the way, so I went straight to Vince and said, hey.
I was on Vince McMahon's team all the way.
So that's essentially, it's so scabby. You know, it's like your fellow workers are trying to do something to benefit all of you, and you're not with that. You're going to go with management.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but this is what you have to remember about Terry Bollea, is that he was always a self-promoter. I mean, this is a guy who, during the height of the wrestling era of the 80s, you know, he always felt that he needed to be the guy at the top of the mountain. And so when he was given opportunities in the movie business, he would take like 6-month sabbaticals and go off and film No Holds Barred or Suburban Commando or Rocky. Well, Rocky 3 was before the boom, but that's what led to it. But that was just, nobody else in the business was given that kind of freedom. And so I'm to believe that today, one of the main reasons why he was able to be at the top of the business, despite his limited in-ring capacity, great self-promoter, great character. But if you ask me, Jen, Randy Savage was just as good, was an infinitely better in-ring performer, and was just as good at promotion. But
I remember when he started. I remember in the very beginning of the Macho Man era. I remember him. Yeah.
I'm talking about all the way to the top. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's very clear that
go down, and I have more to offer than the average wrestler.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Get into it now.
Okay.
A little fun.
Play.
But before I continue, the point is, Hogan is showing you that the only thing that mattered to Hulk Hogan is Hulk Hogan. To hell with the rest of the wrestlers. And I believe as a result of him throwing the entire team, if you will, under the bus, Vince McMahon made sure that he stayed on top for as long as he wanted to, much longer than he should have. And I think it all has to do with the fact that he killed this union attempt in the mid-'80s. Would you agree that that's part of it?
I'm sorry, I'm distracted.
Yeah, you are. Would you like me to repeat what I said?
Can you give me the brief version?
Is it safe to say that Hulk Hogan stayed on top of wrestling much longer than he should have because he made a deal with Vince McMahon to basically curb any attempts at wrestler benefits?
Well, I can see that. I mean, he definitely was in a position where he was getting a lot more mainstream attention and he was getting these opportunities, and he just apparently didn't give a crap about anybody else. So he was going to use whatever he was getting on the outside, help himself. Nobody else needed, you know, like, just very self-serving. It's gross, really.
Jesse stirring shit up, man. You know, he's trying to start a union here, and next thing,
and there's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time.
Roddy Piper.
And I would also say that if you guys haven't seen They Live, highly recommend you see that movie.
I've seen Roddy. How about that? I've seen Roddy Piper live. How about that?
He was a great wrestler.
He's a great wrestler.
He was a great entertainer.
Yes.
But the language that Hogan is using, stirring shit up by trying to start a union, like that's a bad thing. Like, how dare you try to look after your fellow wrestlers?
Look, it's interesting to call him is like a class traitor, but that's essentially what it is in this case. I mean,
well, he traded his fellow wrestlers for his own mountain. That's what he got.
Yeah.
He made.
I wish I knew this then. Like, I didn't really know that was going on then. Right.
I don't
like
really
back
know
when this was happening, I still thought he was fun and cool. Like, I wish I had known more about this then, but.
Oh, absolutely.
You're going to have a bunch of wrestlers walk out on you in Madison Square Garden and just want to let you know what's up.
Hulk Hogan double-crossed Jesse and ratted out all the guys that were trying to get a union going.
Hulk Hogan stews them out.
Hogan ratted him out. The whole thing was a sham. It was something he pulled out of the air, mostly like, we should get together. And quite frankly, no one in the locker room.
Jen, how much plastic surgery has Vince McMahon had?
I don't even know that. Like, how do you get your eyebrows to almost be completely vertical? That's what I'm fascinated by. He looks absurd.
How much can you stretch your face, I guess, is the question.
I don't know. I mean, he looks horrible. When was this? When is this documentary from?
Pretty recent, from what I understand.
Yeah.
I don't know anything past that. As ugly as he is on the outside, he's 10 times uglier on the inside. I mean, he was a ruthless bastard of the highest order.
For sure. And apparently Hulk Hogan was willing to work for him. And I mean, not in the sense of wrestling, but in the sense of against his own colleagues and to cuddle up with this. It's gross.
It is, but it's not entirely surprising. As we have said before, in the capitalist hierarchy, which again, pro wrestling would be a great example of that. And things obviously evolved over time. And I will always believe that one of the biggest differences between Stone Cold and Hulk is that Stone Cold is a guy who had to go through the trials and tribulations of the wrestling world. He was a low card guy to a mid card guy. He really paid his dues. He really knows what it takes to get through the trials and tribulations of the wrestling business, whereas Hulk Hogan never really experienced that. He was a main attraction along with Andre the Giant for many years before the business really hit its stride. I mean, at that time, no one really knew what serious money was like. And then, like I said, Rocky III really changed everything. That's funny. Yeah, he does look like a Vulcan.
All right, let this finish.
Way to get behind Jesse.
So what Vince would do, he called each wrestler one by one. He's like, I know about the meeting. Everybody that showed for the meeting would not have a job in the morning. So nobody showed up.
It was almost always acknowledged that these guys will never go for it, and these guys will never stick together. And the wrestlers would tell me that too. We say boycott WrestleMania altogether, and then half the guys are going to go back and do it and undercut us. Unionizing never happened. And I think it's actually less likely to happen now than it was right before WrestleMania 2.
There's the great badass, if there ever was one. A guy who always looked out for everybody else. And, it's always interesting, Jen, and I see this a lot in acting especially. The guys who play the bad guys are typically the nicer people, and the guys who always try to play the hero are always the biggest dicks.
I'd have to sit and calculate it out to know if that was true, but I definitely would have liked to know all this when I was younger, about what's going on here with this like unionization stuff.
Well, I told people forever that Hulk Hogan would bury every wrestler he could, and I was trying to help the wrestlers, and we all know how that worked out.
Exactly.
It didn't work out too well.
But he sold out his people. It's gross. It's just ugh. So all right, so was there anything else we wanted to talk about Hulk Hogan? Because I always like to go back to one of my favorite quotes, which is, if you have nothing good to say about the dead, say nothing. They're dead. Good.
Colin, could you pull up the YouTube post that was just dropped a little while ago? I want to show the image, and I want to just read the statement regarding Hulk Hogan. And guys, if you're watching, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you share this live stream. Make sure that you click the bell for future live streams so that you are reminded of when we go live, although I would imagine most of our audience does know that we do go live on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Yes, Colin, YouTube post. You know posts on YouTube? No, save Colin. Oh, is that you, Jen? Smart ass. I am a very matter-of-fact person. Is that it, Colin? Is that it right there?
Okay. Okay.
Take your little toy down. Hulk Hogan, in many ways, was America, but he didn't fight for the rights of every man because he didn't. This is what Jesse Ventura alluded to on our podcast regarding his role in the sabotage of the wrestlers' unionization attempt back in 1986. Rather than fight for his fellow employees to have health care, paid leave, and a living wage, he fought to make his boss, Vince McMahon, a billionaire. He'll be remembered for taking wrestling mainstream with Rocky III, body slamming Andre the Giant, and as a cultural icon of the 80s and 90s. He will also be remembered as a self-promoter who threw whoever he needed to under the bus in order to reach the mountaintop and stay there for longer than he should have. But most of all, he'll be remembered for his silence when horrific revelations were revealed regarding Vince McMahon and his hero, President Trump, were brought to light. He may have called everyone brother, but in retrospect, he rarely treated us like one. And if you can scroll to the image of choice, that's how he'll be remembered. Never, ever changing that character for his entire adult life. Living through it, and frankly, it just, I remember at the time, I was at your house. I remember this, and Jason was there, and we saw him get on stage and do this, and I just thought, this is just silly stuff. This is just, again, politics is wrestling in so many ways. So I can certainly see the tie-in to this story, but how are you going to remember the Hulkster, Jen?
I mean, on the one hand, he definitely did a lot for that industry, for, professional wrestling. And my thing with that is that although we know it is ridiculous and silly, it's still extremely athletic, right? So I always kind of have a certain amount of respect for that, regardless of whether or not it's plotted. But I think of him now as somebody who is selfish and looking out for himself and not in any way in solidarity with people. And it's not a good legacy. It's not a good legacy. Like being known as being great for your industry, but being a complete douche in every other capacity. It's not a good legacy. And honestly, just having this picture exist out there is not a good legacy.
Not anymore. That's for sure. And that's how he's going to be remembered. I'm not saying that he should have been out there promoting Kamala Harris. Absolutely not. But it's a reflection of who he always was. He was a self-promoter from beginning to end, and that never changed.